Good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, wherever everybody else is. It's morning in Liverpool, where I'm speaking from. My name's Laura, if we haven't met before. I'm an English teacher with Merseyside Publishing, and I'm really looking forward to teaching you again today. So as always, my lessons take place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. on a Monday and a Tuesday. That's Great British time, so if you are elsewhere in the world, you'll have to convert that, I'm afraid. So today we'll be continuing a series from last week. We did a little bit of spelling last week, and this week we're going to be looking at definitions of spelling, some of the more hard words that you maybe haven't come across before. We'll be practicing how we work out the definitions of those words. So if you have any questions or any messages for me, please leave them in the comments. Hi, Mohammed. I can just see them along the side of the screen, so I'll be able to answer you in real time. But if you do have a private message that you need to ask me, any specifics about English or any topic, that's fine. If you just message the Merseyside Publishing page directly and address your message to Laura, I'll be able to get back to you and hopefully help you out. Hi, Ghaznavi. I'll just give everybody 30 more seconds to join the live stream before we get started. And then we'll, like I say, continue part of the series that we had last week. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Okay, should we get started then? So, like I said, today we'll be... Oh, hi, Savrash. So today's topic is spelling, defining and understanding the meaning of words that we haven't seen before. So if anybody watched last week's video, you'll know that we did a spelling bee of the hardest words in the English language. And whilst I think that was helpful, maybe for the two people who did the spelling bee with me, I also understood that maybe that wasn't helpful for everybody. So I thought, obviously we all come across words every day that we don't understand. Maybe we haven't heard them before, or maybe we're just not sure of the meaning. And I thought that we would have a go today at using context of different words to work out what they mean. Okay, so that's what we'll do today. So I get a question a lot, which is, how will I ever know all of the words in the English language? How will I know what they all mean? Well, first of all, I'd like to say nobody does. I certainly don't. I come across words every day that I'm Googling and making sure that I know the right meaning of, and making sure that I could say them in a sentence correctly, because I think there's nothing that makes you look more silly as there than, using a word out of context. There are 170,000 words in the English language, so if you don't know all of them, I think that's completely reasonable. And yeah, I think it's really common, especially, looking towards your exams, to anticipate that there will be words that you don't mean. And that doesn't mean look through a dictionary and try and learn as many words in the vocabulary as you can. It means accept that there will be words that you don't mean and learn how to sort of not predict what they'll mean, but get the sense of what that sort of word might have a function in the sentence. And that's a skill that you can learn. So I think that we'll have a go at going through this today. What sort of words might I not understand? What sort of words should I look out for? Well, first of all, words in a professional register. So a register means a group of words that are particularly used within a setting. So, like, for example, sales. They may use the words profit, budget, things like that. that you wouldn't necessarily use every day, but are very common to people who do work in that field. So that would be a professional register, for example. Then there are colloquialisms. Colloquialisms are informal language, or there's also slang. Slang is a little bit harder because often, they've put two words together that aren't meant to be together. It's not in the dictionary, whereas usually colloquialisms, you could find them in the dictionary. So an example of a colloquialism might be, oh gosh, I always say these and then I can't give an example. Let's see. A colloquialism, an informal register, chicken out. Okay, so there we go. It's a phrase, it's an informal phrase that we would use. Some people might be familiar with idiomatic phrases. A lot of those are colloquialisms. Okay, then we've got archaic language. Archaic language refers to old-fashioned language that is generally no longer in use, but still can be depending on the context. So, for example, it might be from a couple of centuries ago, and we don't use that as much anymore, but they can still crop up in conversation. So, for example, days of yore. Yore, spelled Y-O-R-E, but you might not have seen before. It's part of, the archaic language. Then we have poetic diction or poeticisms, which are phrases and words used in poetry that may not be used in normal language very commonly, but they do occasionally crop up, and it's good to be aware of them. Then there's nomenclature, which is scientific language, and sort of scientific language, medical language, that you might use perhaps in conversation with a doctor, or when you're reading up about, I don't know, any scientific discoveries. Jargon is just the technical language from any different field. For example, if it was computing, then you might use, medical, I don't know, maybe microchip. I don't know, you can tell that I'm not very computer based. And finally, idiolect. Idiolect is the language used by one particular person. So again, the sort of language that they use that's particular to them is something that you should be aware that you may not understand. Okay. What should I do when I don't understand a word? Well, first of all, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. Everybody comes across words that they don't understand. And I think people maybe who are just learning English might feel a little bit more insecure about asking about words that they don't understand. But in truth, nobody minds and everybody should help you out. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about. So I would suggest you should simply ask if you can. Of course, you might not always be able to. If it's an exam, then you won't be able to ask. You could always Google the definition, look in a dictionary or a thesaurus, and if you find synonyms, maybe one of them you would understand the synonym, and you could also look at the context of the word in the exam. So if you're in an exam, I would suggest that is the best way to work out what the word means if you've never seen it before, because you won't have access to Google. You won't have access to a dictionary, and you won't be able to ask anybody. So you've got to find out a system of working out what the word means, even if you haven't seen it before. Or if you can't work out what it means, work out what its general function is in the sentence. Okay. So what do we mean by context? Well, it's the Oh, okay, good question, Ghaznavi. What's the difference between a thesaurus and a dictionary? So, for anybody who's not sure, a dictionary gives you the definition of a word, what the word means. The thesaurus gives you synonyms of the word. So you might have occasionally a thesaurus and a dictionary combined, and that would give you both the definition and suggestions of synonyms, or you would have two separate books, one for the definition, one for several synonyms, other words that mean the same thing or very slightly different words that you could use instead. Okay, I would suggest if you are looking up synonyms, so for example, let's take the word sad. You would look up synonyms. There might be unhappy, despair, hopeless, depressed, whatever. If you're taking one of those synonyms, I would suggest that you then look for the word in the dictionary, because even though it's registered as a synonym, synonyms can mean very slightly different things. So don't just say, oh, it means the same as sad, because it might not. So for example, hopeless or grief means something slightly different than sad. Grief refers to when somebody has died. So you can't just say, oh, I'm grieved that it's raining today. Like you could say, I'm sad that it's raining today. So just be aware that you should be using the two interchangeably. You should use the dictionary, look up a word, thesaurus, find the synonym, and then go back to the dictionary. Okay. So what do we mean by context of a word? It's the nouns, verbs, and adjectives surrounding the word that you don't understand in a sentence. But I would say that it's also the association and the meanings of those words. So the nouns, the adjectives, the verbs, what do they mean? What are their associations? What do they make you think of when you hear that word? And also I think the phonetics of the word might also give you a clue to what the meaning is using the context. So if that sounds confusing, don't worry, we're going to go on to an example now. Hopefully that will be helpful for you. Okay, let's have a look at our first example then. If you do know the meaning of these words, by the way, you don't need to put them in the chat. We're going to work them out together. Yeah, okay. So the sentences are: the charming girl lowered her eyes, sank onto her knees, and raised her hands in supplication. The blush of her cheeks bespoke her humility and modesty, and she began to sing in the most beguiling tones of sadness. Okay, so there might be several words there that we don't understand. Let's first of all identify the words that you don't know. So I've pulled out a list of the things that I think are difficult words there. Maybe you know what they all mean, maybe you don't. This is about working out how to understand them. So even if you do understand them, that's fine. I have a couple more examples. Okay, so I chose the words supplication, bespoke, humility, and beguiling. I think those are the difficult words there. If there are any others that you don't understand, let me know in the comments and we'll add them to the list. Okay, so first of all, go through, underline, pick them out, make sure that you're spelling them right, and maybe write them down elsewhere. Then consider what sort of word is it. Use objects, suffixes, subjects, participles, and we work it out. So supplication, raised her hands in supplication. So that one's going to be a noun because we've got the verb there is raised. Her hands is the subject, and in must mean that there must be an object there. So that would be supplication. So that must mean that supplication is a noun. And that is also indicated by the ending A-T-I-O-N. because usually that indicates a process, doesn't it, or a state. We also have mortification. That would mean the state of being mortified. There would be, oh gosh, I can only think of bad ones now, but we know what I mean. ICATION indicates to us that that's going to be a noun. It's going to be a state or a process. The blush of her cheeks bespoke her humility and modesty. So let's have a look. Bespoke is going to be a verb, because the blush of the cheeks is going to be the noun phrase there, and her humility, you can see on the next line, and modesty are adjectives. So how are we going to transfer those adjectives, those description, to the noun, which is the blush of the cheeks? Well, there's got to be a verb in there somewhere. And also, I think, whilst the word doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be a verb form, you'll see on the next slide why we might consider it to be a verb. And then finally, we've got beguiling, which, like humility, is being used as an adjective. Beguiling is a little bit different because the ing at the end, you may think that sounds like a verb. However, if you take a look at how it is being used in the sentence, began to sing in the most beguiling tones of sadness, you can see that the word comes immediately before the noun phrase, tones of sadness, which means that beguiling must describe tones of sadness. Okay, the most beguiling tones of sadness. So you can tell by the placement of it in the sentence which word is going to be the adjective. It's going to be beguiling. So I would suggest that you then write down next to the words what they're going to be. So I've put noun, verb, and the two adjectives. Okay. Then, what does the meaning of all of the sentences seem to be? Is there any parts of the words that you recognize? Okay. So tell me, let me know in the comments, what does the girl seem to be? Well, she's described as charming in the first line. We don't know what raising her hands in supplication means, but we do know that she lowered her eyes and she sank onto her knees and she blushed, and there's a mention of her modesty and her singing and sadness. So let's put together all those different elements of the sentences. This is where my background in English literature comes in handy. Why do we get that meaning? What are our impressions of the girl? Who does it remind you of? Does it have any associations in your mind? Does it remind you of, a devilish woman? Does it remind you of an angelic woman? Does it remind you of a saint? Does it remind you, what are the sort of associations that those things have for you? Does it remind you maybe of somebody trying to seduce? Probably not, because we've got the word modesty in it. Does it remind you of innocence? Does it remind you, what are those associations to you? Because having that strong sense of the overall meaning can be helpful even when you don't know the meaning of the smaller particular words. So maybe just form an impression now about what you think about the girl, what you think about the sentences, what you could maybe hazard a guess at what those words are going to mean. And also we can have a look at the parts of the words that you might recognise. There may be elements of the word that you're sure that you've heard before, but that you're not 100% about. So for example, we've got supplication, that S-U-P-P, we've got supply and supple. Maybe you've heard those two words before, supply being the verb to provide and supple being pliable, flexible. Then we have bespoke. Well, be obviously doesn't really carry much meaning, but spoke is the past tense of speak, so maybe that's where you've got that from. Humility, I think, definitely it sounds like humble, but also you might have thought humorous maybe, because you've got that same hue sound. And beguile, maybe you've heard the words guileless or guide or wile. Guileless means free of sneakiness, and you're not a sly or cunning person. If you're guileless, you're very innocent. Guide would be the verb to help somebody, to mentor them, to show them the way. And wile is like cunning. You might have heard the phrase feminine wiles, which is when a woman uses her charms or seductive qualities to get her own way. I'm sure we've all heard of that before. So yeah, maybe you've heard of some of those other words that aren't the same as the word that we're looking at here, but maybe they're related to it. Okay, so then sound the word out. What does the word connotate? What does it sound like? Supplicate. Okay, maybe it isn't very evocative. Bespoke. Bespoke. Humility. Humility. And I think beguiling maybe is the most evocative word there. Maybe that's the word that makes us, is the most maybe provocative and makes us think the most. What is that meaning going to be? Beguile. 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 Okay, so let's have a look at the meanings. The charming girl lowered her eyes and sank upon her knees and raised her hands in supplication. Supplication means the action of begging humbly. And I think that makes sense in the sentence, doesn't it? Raised her hands in supplication. So that is, sort of like this, asking or begging in some sort of way. Bespoke can be an adjective meaning like crafted by an artisan, but in this sentence we're using it as a verb, and it means evidences or indicates. So what does the blush indicate? In the sentence, it indicates her humility and her modesty. So the blush shows that she's humble and she's modest. There we can have the definition of humility there. The quality of being humble, the opposite of pride. Okay. The blush of her cheeks is then speaking, it's evidence of, it's giving away that sense of her modesty. Because that tends to be why we blush, isn't it? Unless it's maybe embarrassment as well. And she began to sing in the most beguiling tones of sadness. Beguiling means enchanting in a deceptive way. So that's where we get the word back to its association there with guileless. Guile meaning, cunning, sneaky. So whilst the girl is singing in an enchanting way, in a very charming way, we also get the sense that it's deceptive, that maybe she's putting on this front of modesty, maybe she's not so innocent as she seems. So you can see that, we could hazard a pretty good guess of what those words mean, but it's important to know the proper definition to get the full meaning of the text. So you wouldn't have known necessarily that beguiling meant deceptive unless you knew the meaning of other words that sounded the same and unless you'd looked it up in a dictionary. So that's the first example. Hopefully you understand what I mean about context now, working out what the word is. Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Working out the associations of it. Are there any words that sound similar that you know what the meaning is? What sort of association, what impression does the piece of writing give you? And especially in speech as well, if somebody's saying a word repeatedly, maybe that you don't know what it means, I think you can much better get a sense in person when you're in front of somebody and they're speaking this word to you of what the word might mean because of how it is being said. So perhaps humility, you would say that maybe with your own humility, or maybe you'd be saying it in a praising way. So it sounds like it's going to be a positive word. It's going to be a positive attribute of somebody when they have humility. Okay, so I think we're done with that example. We'll move on to the other example that I have. Hopefully you're finding this helpful. If you do have any questions about it, please just leave them in the chat for me and I'll be able to see them and get back to you, okay? Pop this back on big screen again. Okay, let's have a look at the next example. She despised him because he possessed so little honour and because she found his manners insipid and dull. Besides this, it was also universally known that he held clandestine meetings at his apartment with married women. Overall, she felt that his behaviour was egregious, contemptible, and despicable. So, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe, again, you know what these words mean, but please don't put the meaning in the chat if you do, just so that we can work them out together. Okay, so I've picked out the words insipid, clandestine, egregious, contemptible, and despicable. So, hopefully those are words that you don't know what they mean. First of all, let's pick out what sort of word is it going to be. So, she despised him because he possessed so little honour and because she found his manners insipid and dull. So what function does the word insipid have in that sentence? Well, it seems to be that she found his manners insipid and dull. So it seems to me that they're going to be descriptive words. You might know what dull means: boring, uninteresting, not colourful. So that's being used as a descriptive word, definitely. Insipid and dull, the sentence structure suggests that we've got two describing words there, dull and insipid, because of that word and between the two. That and suggests that the manners are both things, both insipid and also dull. Okay. Besides this, it was also universally known that he held clandestine meetings at his apartment. So the meetings are prefaced immediately by the word clandestine, which suggests that the word clandestine is going to be an adjective. It's describing the meeting. The meeting is the noun, held is the verb, so that must mean clandestine is going to be the adjective. Overall, she felt that his behaviour was egregious, contemptible, and despicable. So again, we've got a sentence structure of, a list of words, and comes before the last two, which suggests that those three words must be adjectives. Look at the endings of the word. O-U-S, I-B-L-E, and A-B-L-E generally refers to adjectives. So I think we can safely say that we've got all adjectives there because of the sentence structure, because of the endings. Certainly for these ones, able, ibble, and ous. Id, I don't think that is necessarily going to tell you it's an adjective. So that's why you're going to have to use a combination of the word endings, the placement in the sentence, to work out what sort of a word that we're looking at here. Okay. Do you recognise any of these words? What other words could be related to them? Insipid, clandestine, egregious, contemptible, despicable. what other words do we have? Well, for insipid, we have the word insidious or insinuate, if anybody's heard any of those. Insidious means creepy or unsettling. Insinuate means to imply. That's a verb. Imply or suggest in maybe an underhand way that somebody was a bit weird. Then clandestine. I couldn't think of any actual words that sound like clandestine that aren't clandestine. Maybe you'll be able to come up with some of them. And if you do, please let me know in the comments. Then egregious, we have the word egress, if anybody knows what that means. Egress means to leave, to go out of a place, like digress, but egress. Okay, contemptible, we have the word contempt, which means to hate. And despicable, we have despise, which also means to hate. And despot, which is a noun, a person who is very controlling and tyrannical and evil. Okay, so looking at the other words that are similar to this word, what impression of those words do we get? Insipid, insinuous, insinuate, meaning creepy, underhand, egress, to go out, contempt, despise, despot, all meaning hateful, evil. So what impression then are we getting from this passage? What does the overall passage seem to mean? What associations do the words have? What impression do you get of this man? She despised him because he possessed so little honour. What is honour? It's I suppose it's virtue to other people, to doing the right thing in a situation. And he possessed so little of it. His manners are dull. What does that suggest about him? That his manners are boring. Besides this, it was also universally known that he held these meetings in his apartment with married women. It's universally known. He's notorious. He's famous for this behaviour. And he holds some sort of meeting with married women. What does that suggest about his character? And overall, she felt that his behaviour was egregious, contemptible, and despicable. Well, looking at these associations of those words being hateful, evil, despicable, what does that suggest about his behaviour? What impression are you getting about this man? And also, that exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. What does that suggest about the emphatic way that those words might be said? Are they going to be said, overall, she felt that his behaviour was egregious, contemptible, and despicable? Probably not. Probably it's going to be, overall, she felt that his behaviour was egregious, contemptible, and despicable. Okay, so what do we think the words mean? You don't need to know the definition to be able to get an overall sense of what it means. But at the end, when you want to figure out what the word means, take it to a dictionary, find out what the definition of the word is. So, insipid means spiritless, boring. So, like we said, very similar to dull. She despised him because he possessed so little honour, and because she found his manners insipid and dull. She found them spiritless, boring, not engaging. Besides this, it was also universally known that he held clandestine meetings. Clandestine, like Mizan pointed out, means secretive, illicit, usually illicit, and being implicating that they're sexual meetings. Okay, so he held secretive meetings with married women is the meaning of that sentence. Egregious means shockingly bad, outstandingly bad. So Ghaznavi suggested, does egregious mean the same as aggressive? No, it doesn't, but you can see how that guttural sound, ag and egg, egregious, aggressive, that guttural sound of the G, g, suggests to us that the word is going to mean something forceful, at least, because I think you're only making those sort of sounds with your throat in a word when the word is going to have a strong impact, when it's going to have a forceful meaning. Okay, so consider the sound of the word. How is egregious sound different maybe to humble? Humble, saying the word humble forces us to almost say it softly, mumble. It makes us sound humble. Whereas egregious is a very evocative word. We have those strong E sounds, egregious, and we have that forceful G sound, g, egregious. Okay, thanks for your question, Ghaznavi. Then we have contemptible. We've got the word tempt in it, and despicable, also meaning deserving hatred. So again, we've got 3 words at the end there that are quite close in meaning, which is helpful because it can help us to work out what the word means. If you knew maybe what contemptible meant, but not egregious or despicable, you could still get the overall meaning of the sentence from those words that you did know about the word that you didn't know. Okay, so hopefully that's been somewhat helpful for everybody. Even if you're only learning the meaning of some words that maybe you haven't heard before, then it's still a useful exercise. So I've got one more example for us to go through. And then if you have any words in the meantime that you're not sure what they mean, we could, if you just put them into the chat box, I can put them into a sentence for us, and we can have a look at whether we could do the same process for those words. So have a think now if there's any that you've come across that you don't know what they mean, and we'll go through them. Okay? Excuse me. Okay. Ghaznavi also said the passage is about a girl who is thinking about a boy whose outer side is totally different from inner side. Yeah, so absolutely. So we've got 2 characters, I suppose, in this passage, the girl and the boy. And she feels like the outer side, what he's putting across to other people, is different from his inner side. And I think that we definitely get that impression from the clandestine meetings, is because those are secretive, and we have the sense that what he is representing to everybody else, what our immediate impressions are of him, excuse me, might not be the same as the person that he actually is. There's something secretive, there's something illicit in his behaviour, definitely. Thank you, Ghaznavi. And I think, practicing that, thinking about what the implied meaning of the passage is, can really be helpful to working out the meaning. Okay, so for our final example, I'd like you to have a go, if you can, at thinking about what the words mean. The tutor of the young princes easily observed that the elder brother was a vacuous, dense fool, and the younger was a precocious, lively learner. Although the people of the court feared his tyranny, they dared not oppose the ascent of the elder prince to the throne. Instead, they contented themselves by secretly laughing at his idiocy. Okay, so I've picked out words there and underlined them for you that I think are the tricky ones in this passage. So we've got vacuous, precocious, tyranny, and idiocy. Again, if you do know what those words mean, please don't put the meaning of them in the chat box just yet, because we're trying to work out what the words mean, and it's about the process, not about the actual meaning of the word. So pick out the words that we're going to be talking about. Let's have a think. What sort of word then do you think that those words are? Well, let's have a look at the placement in the sentence. Let's have a look at the endings of the words. The brother was a vacuous, dense fool. Do we know what any of those other words mean? Well, we know what brother means, of course. Suggests about a boy. Do we know what fool means? I think we probably do. Fool is meaning somebody who's stupid, somebody who makes everybody makes fun of them. It's almost comic how stupid they are. Dense, do we know what dense means? Well, we know that it refers to the material weight of something, yes, but it can also mean stupid. So it's a word describing fool. So of course it's going to be something at least relating to a lack of intelligence, isn't it? Because it's describing somebody who is a fool. You're not going to say somebody who is an intelligent fool, are you? Because that would be silly. That's not what the word means. So consider it in its context. What might the word vacuous mean, given that it's describing the word fool? It's an adjective. What might it mean? The tutor of the princes easily observed that the elder brother was a vacuous, dense fool, and that the younger was a precocious, lively learner. So, given the sentence structure, we've got the elder brother being something and the younger brother being something. If they were both the same thing, I think the sentence would probably say, the tutor of the young princes easily observed that they were vacuous, dense fools. But because we've got that break in the sentence, we've got the word and we've set the brothers apart, that maybe suggests that the younger is different to the elder. And let's look at the other words that are surrounding the word precocious. Lively learner. So they learn things in a more lively and engaging way. What does that suggest about the brother? What does that suggest about the word precocious? Well, it shows us that the word precocious is going to be an adjective, and you can tell from the two also by the ending, vacuous and precocious. O-U-S. Suggests that these words are both going to be describing the brothers. Vacuous, Ghaznavi has hazarded, meaning dull, or does not have common sense. And I think Dembele said something similar. I think the brother thinks, nonsense, has no meaning to what he's saying. And the precocious is something like very interested on new subjects. Interesting, Ghaznavi. So he's hazarded a guess here. Maybe you could have a think about what you think the word is going to mean. Okay. Lena's also had a little think about the word vacuous. Is it going to be a derivation from vacuum? Excellent, Lena, excellent. Yeah, so it's got that same VAC in it, which suggests to us it's going to be referring to a vacuum. So what would the implication be for the word vacuous if it's coming from the word vacuum? What qualities might the two things have in common? Well, a vacuum is empty, isn't it? It's got no oxygen. It collects other things, yes, but its primary quality is that it is empty. So what might a vacuous person be if the word vacuous is related to the word vacuum? Interesting. A foolish person who is vacuous. What are the same qualities between that person, that fool, and a vacuum? Interesting. Although the people of the court feared his tyranny, they dared not to oppose the ascent of the elder prince to the throne. So we're referring now to the dense, stupid brother, the elder brother, and him going to be the heir to the throne. So that means that he is the next person who's going to become king. That's what we get from the meaning of that sentence. But the people at the court feared his tyranny. They're frightened of him. What aspect of him? What is his tyranny? What does tyranny mean? What other words might we have encountered that tyranny could refer to? Maybe tyrant, if anybody knows that word. A tyrant is somebody who exercises control over other people in an evil, ill-intended way. Okay, so maybe he's a tyrant. What is tyranny? Well, his tyranny refers to a noun, doesn't it? Because they fear his tyranny. That suggests that they're going to be fearing a noun because of the placement of the word in the sentence. Although they fear his tyranny, whatever tyranny is, they dared not to oppose the ascent of the elder prince to the throne. So they dare not get in the way. They don't want to oppose him becoming king, even though they are frightened of him. Okay, interesting. Instead, they contented themselves by secretly laughing at his idiocy. Contented meaning satisfied. They satisfied themselves by secretly laughing at his idiocy. So secretly they're frightened of him, so they're laughing behind their hands, maybe into their sleeves. They're not supposed to be laughing at him. What is it that they're laughing at? His idiocy. So again, we've got that Y at the end, like tyranny, which is suggesting that the word idiocy is a noun. Okay, so what are they laughing at? What other attributes about this prince do we know? Well, we know that he's a fool. We know that he's stupid. So maybe idiocy has got something to do with his stupidity. Let's have a look at the word idiocy. Are there any other words that we know of that maybe are related to the word idiocy? I think I can think of idiot, idiotic, idiosyncrasy. That IDIO is definitely familiar to me. And all of those words, idiot, idiotic, idiosyncrasy, refer to stupidity or mistakes. So I think we've pretty much worked out what that one's going to mean. Okay, so let's have a look at the definitions then. Vacuous, possessing little intelligence. So like Lena said, derivation from vacuum, they're empty of intelligence. They're stupid. So consider the word vacuous as being empty, empty-headed. Precocious, ability to learn at any early age, advanced, intellectually, academically gifted, which I think Ghaznavi has pretty much predicted there as well. Precocious is something as like very interested on a new subject, ability to learn new things at a very early age. So yeah, absolutely, I think we got the meaning for that one there. Tyranny, a cruel and oppressive government. So the stupid brother would exercise, terrible control over somebody else. And I think Ghaznavi as well. Pressure without good reason. Yes, so it's not a reasonable rule. And I think that relates as well to the stupidity of the prince, because there's no good reason, there's no rationality in his head. So the elder brother, he's vacuous, he's got little intelligence, he's dense, he's stupid, he's a fool. So his tyranny is going to be without reason, without rationality. So yes, probably he's going to give pressure without good reason. It's a cruel and oppressive government. And finally, idiocy there. Something of a foolish type. Yes, so I've put the definition. Extremely stupid behaviour. Extremely stupid. Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful for you. I've come to the end of the slideshow now. And I did get one other question from Ghaznabi, I think. One word I need to know from you that is not related to this. We are using the word stir when we are mixing up liquid. If we go for a mixed up solid word, what could we use? Okay, so quite right. You would stir the tea, stir the pot, stir the drink, to combine different liquids together. And it's also just the motion, I think, the motion of stirring like this, and usually circular motions. So for example, when we're stirring the pot, okay, it's not necessarily that you're combining different liquids. It's more that you are moving the vegetables around, if that makes sense. You are stirring a liquid, yeah. I understand your question. Mixing up solid food depends, I think, on the motion. So for example, if you are mixing up the ingredients of bread, I think everybody will be familiar with the word knead with a K, which is to like mix with your hands like this. There might also be, I don't know, maybe crumbling, which would be to break down materials and mix them together like this. Maybe if you're cooking, maybe baking a cake or cookies, something like that, then you would have to break down the materials, mixing them together. There's also, I don't know, let's see, what's suggested for us. Blended, okay, that's again, it's going to be more of a quicker process. Blending together can be either blurring the lines between two things, or it could also be, I'm sure you're familiar with a blender. It's got blades in that do this and mix up the material that's in the blender. Maybe it's fruit, maybe it's it could be liquids as well. We also have whisk. Whisk would be the, obviously, as well as a noun, a whisk, which is a kitchen utensil that is used for combining different solid foods. So there's a couple of examples, I think. If we're mixing together vegetables, do you mean crushing them and putting them all together? If so, I would just say probably combine and crush would be the appropriate words. But if you mean putting them together, mixing them is quite it's a word that has a lot of different meanings. I think mix depends how much you mean mixed. If you mean literally crushing them together, that's quite different than to just mix them together, you know, in a tray to put in the oven. Let me know. Okay. If anybody else has any other questions, whether it's related to this session or not, please don't hesitate to just put them on the chat and ask me, or message me directly as well. If there's something in particular that you need to know that you don't want everybody else to know as well. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of today's session. So hopefully you found it useful. I haven't yet put together a PowerPoint for tomorrow's session. So if you do have any suggestions of what you'd like me to teach tomorrow, please put them in the comments. I'll be going back through them today, or message me directly as well if you think that would be helpful. My name is Laura, for anybody who's not sure and hasn't watched any of my videos before. My videos are Mondays and Tuesdays at 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Great British time. So the same time today as tomorrow. And and I'm happy to teach you whatever you want to hear, but you need to tell me what you'd like to hear. So please, please, please let me know in the comments what you'd like to be taught, and I'll go through it with you. But if you don't tell me, then I won't know. So please let me know. Okay? All right. I'm going to get going now then. Have a nice day, everybody. I look forward to reading your suggestions for tomorrow's session. And message me if you need anything. Okay? Thank you for joining me today, everybody. Have a great day or night wherever you are. Stay safe, everybody.